Arrogant young CEO says, "You can't even read. How are you going to buy it, you poor man?" The November rain battered the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ashford Luxury Motors' main showroom in Charlotte, North Carolina, creating a rhythmic percussion that usually soothed Ravenna Ashford's nerves. But today, nothing could calm the fury building in her chest. At 27, she'd built an empire of 15 Mercedes dealerships across the Southeast, transforming her grandfather's single struggling location into a $200 million automotive dynasty. Her royal blue Armani blazer was immaculate, her ice-blonde hair pulled into a severe chignon, her 5-inch Louboutin heels clicking like a metronome of power across the marble floors. She stood in her glass-walled office on the second floor, surveying the showroom below like a queen observing her kingdom. Every vehicle gleamed under precision lighting. Every salesperson moved with choreographed efficiency. Everything was perfect, controlled, exactly as she demanded. Then the doors opened, and perfection shattered. A man entered, his clothes immediately marking him as wrong for this space. Navy blue janitor's uniform, worn work boots that squeaked against the polished marble, shoulders hunched against the rain. But it was the small figure beside him that made Ravenna's lip curl with distaste. A little girl, no more than 7, wearing a pink raincoat 2 sizes too big, her hand clutching her father's with desperate trust. Ravenna pressed the intercom button. "Marcus, we have vagrants in the showroom. Handle it." "On it, Miss Ashford," her sales manager replied smoothly. But Ravenna didn't look away. Something about the man's face as he knelt beside his daughter, pointing at the vehicles with gentle explanation, made her stomach twist with an emotion she refused to name. The little girl's eyes were wide with wonder, her small voice carrying up to Ravenna's office despite the distance. "Daddy, look at that one. It's so shiny." "That's a Mercedes S-Class, sweetheart," the father said softly. His voice was educated, refined, completely at odds with his appearance. "One of the finest cars in the world. Can we get one someday?" The little girl's question was innocent, hopeful. "Maybe someday, Lily, when Daddy's big break comes through." Ravenna felt her fingers tighten on her designer pen. Big break. These people always had their fantasies, their delusions about escaping their stations in life. She'd heard it 1,000 times from people who walked into her dealerships with empty pockets and full dreams, wasting her staff's time, diminishing her brand's exclusivity. She watched Marcus approach the pair, his smile professional but cold. Before he could speak, Ravenna made a decision that would change everything. She descended the stairs, her heels announcing her arrival like a war drum. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This is a luxury automotive showroom, not a public viewing gallery." The man stood slowly, positioning himself slightly in front of his daughter. Up close, Ravenna could see he was younger than she'd initially thought, maybe mid-30s, with kind brown eyes that held both exhaustion and dignity. A photo peeked from his uniform shirt pocket, showing the same little girl smiling at the camera. "We were just looking," he said quietly. "My daughter has never seen cars like these up close." "Looking implies the ability to purchase," Ravenna countered, crossing her arms. "Can you afford even the down payment on our entry-level models? Do you understand what you're even looking at?" The showroom had gone silent. Other customers paused their conversations. Sales staff stopped mid-pitch. Everyone was watching. "I understand more than you might think," the man replied, his voice still calm, but with an edge of steel underneath. Ravenna laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "Really? Tell me, what's your occupation, besides obviously working in sanitation or maintenance?" "I'm a janitor," he said without shame. "I clean the office building at Sterling Plaza." "Sterling Plaza," Ravenna repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. "So you push a mop for $8 an hour, and you're teaching your daughter to covet things she'll never have. How responsible." The little girl, Lily, stepped forward. Her chin was trembling, but she met Ravenna's eyes with surprising courage. "My daddy is the smartest person in the whole world," she said, her voice small but fierce. "And he works really hard. He reads to me every night and helps me with my homework, and that's adorable." Ravenna interrupted, crouching down to the child's level with a cruel smile. But reading bedtime stories doesn't pay for a Mercedes, does it? Your daddy makes promises he can't keep. Do you know what that's called? It's called lying. I never lied to her, the father said, his voice tight now. I said maybe someday. I'm working on what? Ravenna stood abruptly, her eyes flashing. Some get-rich-quick scheme? A lottery ticket? Let me educate you about reality. These vehicles start at $75,000. That's probably more than you make in 2 years. You don't belong here. Your daughter doesn't belong here. You're teaching her to dream above her station, and that's cruel. The man's jaw clenched. For a moment, Ravenna thought he might yell, might cause a scene that would justify calling security. Instead, he simply took his daughter's hand. Come on, Lily, we should go. But Lily didn't move. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag containing crumpled dollar bills. I have $17, she said to Ravenna. I've been saving it. Is that enough for a really small Mercedes? Like a toy one? The innocence of the question made several onlookers gasp. Even Marcus looked uncomfortable. Ravenna felt something crack in her chest, but she'd gone too far to stop now. $17, she repeated slowly. Your daughter has $17, and you brought her here to look at $100,000 cars. You're not just poor, you're pathetic. The man's face went pale, then flushed red. But when he spoke, his voice was eerily calm. You know what's truly pathetic? Someone who measures worth in dollar signs. Someone so empty inside that they need to crush a 7-year-old's dreams to feel powerful. He knelt beside Lily, wiping her tears with gentle fingers. Baby girl, look at me. One day, I promise you, we're going to come back here. And when we do, we're going to buy the most beautiful Mercedes they have, not because we need to prove anything to mean people, but because you deserve beautiful things, because you're worth more than all the cars in this building combined. Lily nodded, sniffling. Even that silver one. Even that silver one. They turned to leave, and Ravenna felt a strange urge to call them back, to apologize, to somehow undo what she'd just done. But her pride, that iron core that had carried her through hostile boardrooms and skeptical investors, kept her silent. As they reached the door, the man paused and looked back at her. You asked what I'm working on. I'm working on something that's going to change my daughter's life, and when it does, I'll remember this moment. I'll remember exactly how you made her feel. The threat in his quiet words made Ravenna's pulse quicken, but she forced a laugh. I'm sure I'll be trembling with anticipation. Now, if you're quite finished with your dramatic exit. They left. The door closed. The showroom slowly returned to normal activity, though staff members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ravenna returned to her office, determined to forget the entire incident. But hours later, as she prepared to leave for the day, she found herself thinking about the man's eyes. About the way Lily had offered her $17 with such hope, about the photograph in his pocket. She shook it off, grabbed her Birkin bag, and headed to her car. A Maybach S650, black and gleaming, and worth more than most people's houses. As she slid into the leather interior, her phone buzzed with a text from her property manager. Ms. Ashford, the Historical Society contacted me again about the Whitmore estate. They're still pressuring you to open the archives. They say there may be rightful heirs who don't know about the property. Should I continue deflecting? Ravenna deleted the message without responding. The Whitmore estate, her beloved mansion that she'd purchased at auction 3 years ago for $3. $2 million had come with complicated history. The previous owner, Jonathan Whitmore, had died without a clear will, and the property had gone into probate. Ravenna had swooped in during the legal chaos, her lawyers ensuring she got the estate for below-market value. There had been rumors of missing heirs, of family members who might have claims. But Ravenna's legal team had assured her the sale was airtight. The mansion was hers now, filled with priceless antiques and artwork that had come with the estate. She'd made it her sanctuary, her proof that she'd risen above her own modest beginnings. As she drove through Charlotte's rainy streets toward her mansion, Ravenna had no idea that the janitor she'd humiliated was named Elias Chen. She didn't know that Elias was the grandson of Jonathan Whitmore, born to Whitmore's estranged daughter, who'd married a Chinese immigrant against her father's wishes. She didn't know that Jonathan had spent years trying to find Elias, desperate to reconcile with his daughter's family before death claimed him. She didn't know that a manila envelope sat in a law office downtown, containing DNA results, property deeds, and a letter explaining that Elias Chen was the rightful heir to the Whitmore fortune, including the estate Ravenna, now called home. And she certainly didn't know that tomorrow morning Elias would receive a certified letter that would turn his world, and hers, completely upside down. But as Ravenna pulled into the circular driveway of the Whitmore estate, admiring its neo-Gothic architecture and manicured grounds, she felt a strange unease she couldn't explain. The mansion suddenly felt less like a sanctuary and more like a borrowed space, temporary and fragile. Inside, she poured herself a glass of wine and stood in the grand library, surrounded by books that had belonged to strangers. For the first time in 3 years, she wondered about the man who'd built this house, about the family who'd lived here, about the stories these walls could tell. She thought about Lily's small voice. Is $17 enough? And she thought about Elias's promise. When it does, I'll remember this moment. Ravenna shook off the discomfort and climbed the sweeping staircase to her bedroom. Tomorrow would be another day of conquest, another day of proving her worth through her empire. The janitor and his daughter were already fading from her memory, just another forgettable interaction in a life full of people who didn't matter. She had no way of knowing that forgetting Elias Chen would prove to be the biggest mistake of her life. Elias Chen stood at the bathroom mirror of his small apartment at 5:30 a.m., carefully shaving around the perpetual dark circles under his eyes. Lily was still asleep in the only bedroom, her small form curled around the stuffed rabbit they'd found at a thrift store last Christmas. He slept on the pull-out couch in the living room, though sleep was a generous description of the restless hours he spent there each night. The apartment was a modest one-bedroom in a building that had seen better decades, but it was clean and warm, and Lily had never once complained. She was 7 years old and had never known anything different. Her mother had died when Lily was just 3, leaving Elias to navigate single fatherhood while grieving a loss that still felt fresh 4 years later. His wife, Sarah, had been the daughter of Chinese immigrants, just like Elias. They'd met at UNC Chapel Hill, where Elias had been studying engineering on a full scholarship. Sarah had been his whole world, bright and funny, and convinced that Elias was destined for greatness. Then came the pregnancy, unexpected but welcomed. Then the complications during delivery that had left Sarah in a fragile state. Then the infection that the doctors had caught too late, leaving Elias alone with a newborn, and debts that swallowed his engineering dreams whole. He dropped out of school with just 1 semester left, too devastated to focus and too broke to afford childcare while he studied. The medical bills had destroyed their modest savings. His student loans went into forbearance, then default. And somehow years had passed with Elias, working whatever jobs he could find that allowed him to be present for Lily. For the past 11 years, that job had been janitorial work at Sterling Plaza, a downtown office building that housed law firms, financial consultants, and the kind of people who looked through him like he was invisible. The pay was barely above minimum wage, but the health insurance was decent, and his supervisor let him adjust his hours around Lily's school schedule. Today, as he headed to work, Elias's mind kept replaying yesterday's humiliation at Ashford Luxury Motors. He'd known it was a mistake the moment they walked in, but Lily had been so excited. She'd seen a commercial for Mercedes during her favorite show and had asked if they could just look at the pretty cars. He should have said no, should have taken her to the library or the park instead, but he'd been feeling hopeful lately, almost recklessly so because of something he'd been working on. For the past 3 years, during Lily's school hours and late into the nights when she was asleep, Elias had been teaching himself advanced programming and artificial intelligence through free online courses. He'd rebuilt his engineering foundation and had designed a revolutionary algorithm for supply chain optimization that he believed could transform how businesses managed inventory. Last month, he'd finally worked up the courage to pitch his software to a small logistics company. They'd been impressed enough to pilot his program. If the pilot succeeded, they'd pay him $50,000 up front and royalties on every implementation. It was enough to change their lives, enough to justify taking Lily to look at those cars and dream about a different future. And then that woman, that cold-eyed CEO, had destroyed his daughter's joy with such casual cruelty. "Daddy?" Lily's small voice came from the bedroom doorway. She stood there in her purple pajamas, clutching her rabbit, her eyes puffy from crying herself to sleep the night before. "Do you really think we'll get a Mercedes someday?" Elias crossed to her immediately, kneeling to her level. "Baby girl, I promise you, one day we're going to have everything we need and more. That lady was wrong about us." "She said you were pathetic," Lily whispered. "She said I shouldn't dream above my station. What does that mean?" Elias felt rage and helplessness war in his chest. "It means she's forgotten something important. It means she's let success make her mean. But we're not going to be like that, okay? When good things happen for us, we're going to remember what it felt like to struggle, and we're going to be kind." Lily nodded, then hugged him tightly. "I'm proud you're my daddy." Those 5 words, spoken with absolute sincerity, made the humiliation worth it. After dropping Lily at school, where she put on a brave face for her friends, Elias headed to Sterling Plaza. His shift started at 8 a.m., giving him time to clean the building before most occupants arrived. He moved through his routine with practiced efficiency, emptying trash cans, vacuuming floors, cleaning bathrooms, polishing the marble lobby until it gleamed. Around 10 a.m., as he was restocking paper towels in the 3rd-floor men's room, he heard his name being called over the building's intercom system. "Elias Chen, please report to the main security desk. Elias Chen, to the main security desk." His stomach dropped. In 11 years, he'd never been summoned like this. Had someone complained about his work? Was he being let go? At the security desk, a uniformed guard he didn't recognize handed him a certified letter. "You need to sign for this. Some law firm's been trying to reach you for weeks, apparently." Elias signed with trembling hands and took the thick envelope. The return address read Morrison, Lancaster and Associates, Estate Law. His first thought was that somehow his defaulted student loans had finally caught up with him, that his wages were about to be garnished. He waited until his lunch break to open it, sitting in the building's service stairwell where he usually ate his packed sandwich. His hands shook as he unfolded the letter. "Dear Mr. Elias Jonathan Chen, after extensive investigation, we have identified you as the sole surviving heir to the estate of Jonathan Edward Whitmore, deceased March 15, 2019. Your biological connection to Mr. Whitmore has been verified through DNA samples obtained from medical records." Elias stopped reading, his vision blurring. Jonathan Whitmore. His mother's father, the grandfather who had disowned his own daughter for marrying Elias's father, a Chinese immigrant who worked in a restaurant. The grandfather Elias had never met, whose existence his mother had rarely mentioned, except to say that some bridges once burned could never be rebuilt. He forced himself to continue reading. "Mr. Whitmore spent his final years attempting to locate you and your mother, Chen Li, formerly Linda Whitmore. Unfortunately, his search proved unsuccessful during his lifetime. Upon his death, the estate entered probate, and certain assets were sold due to the lack of identifiable heirs. However, recent changes in DNA database technology have allowed us to establish your lineage definitively. You are entitled to the following. 1. The remaining liquid assets of the Whitmore estate, $8. $4 million. 2. Ownership claim to the Whitmore family estate at 1847 Magnolia Heights Drive, Charlotte, NC, currently occupied by Ravenna Ashford, who purchased the property at probate auction. Our analysis indicates that the auction sale was premature and may be legally challengeable given your newly verified status as rightful heir. 3. Various other holdings, including stocks, bonds, and personal property, currently valued at approximately $31. 6 million. Total estate value, $40 million. Elias read the numbers 3 times, certain he was hallucinating. $40 million. The address, 1847 Magnolia Heights Drive. He'd seen that mansion from the road, a Gothic masterpiece that looked like something from a fairy tale. And it belonged to him. His grandfather had wanted to find him, had tried to make amends before dying. The letter continued with details about DNA verification, legal procedures, and a request that he contact the firm immediately to begin the inheritance process. There was also a sealed envelope attached, labeled "Personal Letter from Jonathan Whitmore to any discovered heirs." Elias opened it with reverent hands. "To whoever reads this, and I pray it reaches my daughter Linda or her children, my name is Jonathan Whitmore, and I am an old fool who let pride destroy the only thing that mattered, family. When my daughter fell in love with Chen Wei, I saw only what made him different from us. I couldn't see what she saw, a good man who loved her truly. I said terrible things. I gave her an ultimatum, him or her inheritance. She chose love as she should have. I expected her to come crawling back. She never did. For 20 years I told myself I'd been right to stand firm. For 20 years I was wrong. When the doctors told me I had 6 months to live, I finally understood what mattered. I hired investigators to find Linda, to find any children she might have had. I wanted to apologize, to know my grandchildren, to undo 30 years of stubborn pride. I failed. I died without finding you. But if you're reading this, then perhaps there's such a thing as redemption beyond the grave. The estate, the money, the mansion, none of it matters compared to family. I hope you'll use it to build something beautiful, to create the kind of loving home I was too foolish to maintain. I'm sorry I never got to know you. I'm sorry I let hatred steal decades that should have been filled with love. Your grandfather, in hope and regret, Jonathan Whitmore Elias, sat in that stairwell and wept for the grandfather he'd never known, for his mother, who died 5 years ago, never knowing her father had wanted to reconcile, for Lily, who would grow up with opportunities he'd thought impossible just an hour ago. And underneath it all, a darker emotion began to simmer. The address on that letter, 1847 Magnolia Heights Drive, belonged to Ravenna Ashford. The woman who'd called him pathetic was living in his family's home, sleeping in bedrooms that should have been his mother's inheritance, walking on floors that his grandfather had meant for his grandchildren. Elias pulled out his phone and looked up the property. The photos showed the neo-Gothic mansion in all its glory. Towers and turrets, stained glass windows, acres of manicured gardens. The caption noted that the current owner had purchased it in 2019 at a probate auction for $3, $2 million, well below its $6 million market value. She'd swooped in like a vulture, taking advantage of legal chaos to steal a family legacy. And yesterday, she'd laughed at him, called him pathetic, made his daughter cry. Elias's hands trembled as he dialed the law firm's number. "Morrison, Lancaster and Associates. How may I direct your call? This is Elias Chen. I just received a letter about the Whitmore estate." There was a pause, then a rush of professional warmth. "Mr. Chen, we've been trying to reach you for weeks. Please hold for Mr. Morrison." Within seconds, a refined voice came on the line. "Mr. Chen, Thomas Morrison here. First, let me express our congratulations and our firm's commitment to seeing this matter resolved fairly and swiftly." "The letter mentioned the mansion," Elias said, his voice harder than he'd known it could be. "It says Ravenna Ashford is living there." "Yes, that's correct. The probate court auctioned the property in 2019, believing there were no surviving heirs. However, with your verified status, you have strong legal grounds to challenge that sale. We can pursue several avenues." "I want the mansion," Elias interrupted. "I want everything that belonged to my grandfather. And I want Ravenna Ashford to know exactly who she humiliated yesterday." There was a brief silence. Yesterday? Nothing, Elias said. How long will this take? The legal process could take months, possibly years if she challenges. However, given the circumstances and the clear DNA evidence, we're confident we can expedite matters. The probate court will likely rule in your favor. The question is whether Ms. Ashford will settle or fight. She'll fight, Elias said with certainty. She's not the type to give up anything willingly. Then we'll be prepared. Mr. Chen, I know this is overwhelming, but you should understand. From this moment forward, your life has changed completely. The liquid assets alone will transfer to you within weeks. The property dispute will take longer, but you are effectively a very wealthy man. After the call ended, Elias sat in the stairwell for another hour, missing the rest of his shift, not caring. His mind raced with implications and possibilities. He could quit this job, could enroll Lily in a better school, could finish his engineering degree, could give his daughter everything he'd promised and more. But more than any of that, he could walk back into Ashford Luxury Motors and watch Ravenna Ashford's face when she realized exactly who she'd destroyed. Elias picked up his phone and texted his supervisor that he was sick, then headed home to pick up Lily early from school. They needed to celebrate, though she didn't know why yet. As he drove through Charlotte's streets in his 15-year-old Honda, Elias passed the entrance to Magnolia Heights, the exclusive neighborhood where his grandfather's mansion stood, where Ravenna lived in luxury, built on his family's legacy. Soon, very soon, that would change. But as Elias pulled up to Lily's school, watching her run toward him with her backpack bouncing and her smile bright, despite yesterday's tears, he made a decision. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about reclaiming what had been stolen, about showing Lily that good things could happen to good people. He would handle this with dignity. He would let the law take its course. He would prove that having money didn't require becoming cruel. He had no way of knowing that Ravenna Ashford was about to receive her own letter, that her lawyers were about to inform her that the mansion she loved was being legally challenged by a man named Elias Chen. And he certainly couldn't have predicted that when their lives collided again, the impact would reveal secrets about both their families that would change everything they thought they knew about loyalty, legacy, and what it really meant to be rich or poor. But that revelation was still days away. For now, Elias simply held his daughter close and whispered, "Remember that Mercedes you loved. Let's go look at it again. This time, we're going to buy it." Lily's squeal of joy made everything, all the years of struggle, all the humiliation, completely worth it. Ravenna Ashford woke at 5:45 a.m. to the sound of her alarm, its gentle chiming designed to ease her into consciousness without jarring her nervous system. Her bedroom at the Whitmore estate, which she'd renovated into a minimalist sanctuary of whites and silvers, felt like a cloud. The king-sized bed was positioned to catch the sunrise through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the estate's gardens. She moved through her morning routine with clockwork precision. 20 minutes of yoga, a cold shower to sharpen her mind, then her careful application of the armor she wore each day, the tailored suits, the perfect hair, the makeup that enhanced without appearing to exist. At 7 a.m. exactly, her house manager, Mrs. Patricia Gomez, knocked softly and entered with a breakfast tray, Greek yogurt with berries, black coffee, and a folder containing the day's briefing prepared by her assistant. "Good morning, Ms. Ashford. You have a board meeting at 9, lunch with the regional managers at noon, and your property lawyer has requested an urgent meeting at 4. He stressed that it's time-sensitive. Ravenna's hand paused over her coffee cup. "Urgent? Did he say why?" "Only that it concerns the estate and couldn't be discussed over phone or email." A prickle of unease ran down Ravenna's spine, but she dismissed it. Probably another nuisance from the Historical Society, wanting to tour the mansion or demanding access to archives that were none of their business. "Confirm the meeting," she said. "Have him come to my office at the dealership." The morning proceeded exactly as planned. Her board meeting resulted in approval for her expansion into the Florida market. Her lunch with regional managers confirmed that Q4 numbers were exceeding projections. Everything in Ravenna's empire was functioning with the precision she demanded. At 3:55 p.m., her assistant buzzed through. "Ms. Ashford, Gerald Hampton is here." Gerald Hampton, her property lawyer, was a bulldog of a man who'd helped her acquire the Whitmore estate and several other properties over the years. He was expensive, ruthless, and had never once asked for an urgent meeting in the 3 years she'd worked with him. He entered her office carrying a briefcase that seemed heavier than usual, his normally confident expression replaced with something that looked almost like concern. "Ravenna," he began, dispensing with formalities in a way that immediately set her on edge. "We have a significant problem with the Whitmore estate." Ravenna set down her pen with deliberate calm. "What kind of problem?" Gerald opened his briefcase and withdrew a stack of documents. 4 days ago, a law firm called Morrison, Lancaster and Associates filed a petition with the probate court to invalidate the 2019 auction sale of the property. They're representing a man named Elias Chen, who they claim is the rightful heir to the Whitmore estate. The name meant nothing to Ravenna. That's absurd. The probate court did an exhaustive search for heirs before authorizing the auction. That's why I got the property at such a favorable price. They did search, Gerald agreed. But they didn't find Elias Chen because his connection to Jonathan Whitmore was through Whitmore's estranged daughter, who married a Chinese immigrant and took his surname. The daughter died 5 years ago, but her son, Elias, is very much alive and has DNA evidence proving he's Whitmore's grandson. Ravenna felt her stomach drop, but she kept her expression neutral. DNA evidence can be challenged. How certain are we that it's legitimate? Very certain, Gerald said grimly. The testing was done by a reputable lab using medical samples on file from both Whitmore and Elias Chen. Chain of custody is solid. The science is sound. This man is Jonathan Whitmore's biological grandson and only surviving heir. Then why didn't he come forward 3 years ago? Because he didn't know. Apparently, Whitmore's daughter was estranged from her father for 30 years. She never told her son about his grandfather. Chen only found out about his connection after Morrison's firm used genetic genealogy databases to track down potential heirs. Ravenna's mind raced, calculating angles, looking for weaknesses. What exactly are they asking for? Gerald met her eyes directly. Everything. They want the mansion returned to Chen's possession. They want compensation for 3 years of fair market rental value. They want all contents of the estate that were sold with the property, and they're prepared to tie this up in court for years if necessary. That's insane. I bought that property legally. The probate court made a mistake, Gerald finished. A legitimate mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. Ravenna, I've reviewed their filing. It's solid. They have precedent, they have DNA evidence, and they have a sympathetic plaintiff, a single father, working as a janitor who was cheated out of his rightful inheritance. Janitor, the word hung in the air like an accusation. What did you say his name was? Ravenna asked slowly. Elias Chen, 34 years old, custodial worker, lives in... Gerald consulted his notes. A 1-bedroom apartment in the Riverside district with his 7-year-old daughter. The room tilted slightly. Ravenna gripped her desk edge, her mind flooding with images, navy blue uniform, work boots, gentle voice explaining cars to his little girl, $17 offered with hope, her own mocking laughter echoing through the showroom. I need to see a photo, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Gerald looked surprised but pulled out his phone, navigating to a document. This is from their legal filing. He turned the screen toward her, and Ravenna found herself looking at a professional headshot of the man she'd humiliated 3 days ago, Elias Chen, the janitor she'd called pathetic, the father she'd accused of lying to his daughter about their future, the man who owned the mansion she called home. Ravenna. Gerald's voice seemed to come from very far away. Are you all right? You look pale. She forced herself to breathe, To think, to not reveal the magnitude of her mistake. I'm fine. What are my options? Gerald laid it out with brutal honesty. She could fight and likely lose, wasting hundreds of thousands in legal fees while the court inevitably ruled against her. She could settle, negotiating a timeline for her departure, and perhaps some compensation for renovations she'd made. Or she could do the unthinkable and simply surrender the property, hoping Chen would be gracious about the timeline. "How long do I have?" she asked. "To respond to the petition?" 30 days. "But Ravenna, I need to be frank with you. This isn't a fight you can win. The best we can do is negotiate favorable terms for your exit." After Gerald left, Ravenna sat alone in her office as evening shadows lengthened across Charlotte's skyline. She thought about the mansion, about every room she'd renovated to her specifications, every piece of art she'd hung, every garden path she'd redesigned. She thought about how the library felt on quiet Sunday mornings, how the sunset looked from the tower room she'd converted into her meditation space. And she thought about Elias Chen standing in her showroom, his daughter's hand in his, promising her that one day they'd come back and buy that Mercedes. He'd known. When he made that promise, he must have already known about the inheritance. He'd stood there and let her mock him, let her call him pathetic, let her make his daughter cry, all while knowing he owned the very ground she slept on. The realization made her feel sick with humiliation, but also something else, something that felt uncomfortably like shame. Her phone buzzed with a text from her house manager. "Ms. Ashford, there's a situation at the estate. The main gate security called. A man claiming to be the property owner is requesting access. He has a lawyer with him and what appears to be court documents. Should I call the police?" Ravenna's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could have him removed, could hide behind her lawyers, could delay the inevitable confrontation, or she could face him now on what might be her last evening in the home she loved. She texted back, "Let him in. I'll meet him at the main entrance." The drive from her dealership to the estate took 20 minutes, but Ravenna's mind covered years. She thought about her own childhood, about the small apartment where she'd grown up with a single mother who'd worked 3 jobs, about her drive to escape that life, to build something impressive enough that no one would ever look down on her again, about how, somewhere along the way, success had transformed from motivation into armor, and armor had become cruelty. As she pulled through the gates of the Whitmore estate, she saw 2 cars parked in the circular driveway, a modest sedan and a black Mercedes that she recognized as belonging to Morrison, Lancaster and Associates. Standing on his front steps was Elias Chen, wearing clean jeans and a button-down shirt instead of his janitor's uniform. Beside him stood a silver-haired man she assumed was his lawyer. Ravenna parked and approached them with her chin high, her heels clicking against the cobblestones with false confidence. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice steady, "I assume you're here to discuss the property dispute." Elias looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. Not anger exactly, not triumph, something quieter and more devastating, disappointment. "Actually, Miss Ashford, I'm here because my daughter asked me to do something before we take any legal action." He pulled out his phone and showed her a photo of Lily, the little girl from the showroom, holding a hand-drawn picture. "She drew this today at school. It's a picture of the house where her great-grandfather lived, where her grandmother should have grown up. She asked me if we could see it together, just once, before lawyers and judges get involved." Ravenna stared at the child's drawing, a Gothic mansion rendered in crayon, with stick figures labeled "Me, Daddy, Great-Grandpa's house" standing in front. "She doesn't know about the other day," Elias continued quietly. "Doesn't know you're the same woman who made her cry in your showroom. I didn't tell her because I want her to understand that good things can happen without revenge, that we can reclaim what's ours without becoming cruel." The words hit Ravenna like physical blows. "I'm asking you, as one human being to another, if my daughter and I can walk through this house, just once, so I can tell her about her great-grandfather, about the grandmother she never met, about the family history that belongs to her. After that, Our lawyers can handle the rest, however you choose. Ravenna stood on the steps of a mansion that wasn't hers, facing a man she'd wronged in ways she was only beginning to understand. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to maintain her pride, to let the lawyers handle everything. But she heard Lily's small voice in her memory. "Is $17 enough?" And her own cruel response, "You're pathetic." "Yes," Ravenna heard herself say. "Yes, you can come in, both of you." Both of. Elias looked surprised, as if he'd expected her to refuse. "Thank you." As Ravenna unlocked the grand front doors and led them inside, she had no idea that this moment of grudging grace would be the first step toward revelations that would shake both their worlds. She didn't know that hidden in the mansion's sealed archives were documents that would reveal why Jonathan Whitmore had been so desperate to find his grandson before he died. She didn't know that the choice she'd just made, allowing Elias and Lily inside, would unlock a mystery that had been buried for 30 years, a mystery that connected their families in ways neither of them had imagined. And as Lily Chen stepped into the grand foyer, her eyes wide with wonder at the soaring ceilings and crystal chandelier, she pointed to a portrait on the wall and said something that made both adults freeze. "Daddy, that painting, that lady, she looks just like Mommy." The portrait hung in the grand foyer like a ghost made tangible. It showed a woman in her late 20s, dark-haired and elegant, wearing a green silk dress. The nameplate beneath read, "Linda Whitmore, 1988. Elias felt his knees weaken. "That's your grandmother," he whispered to Lily. "Your mommy's mommy. My mother." Lily pressed closer to him. "She's pretty. Why didn't we know about her?" Ravenna stood frozen, staring at the portrait she'd passed 1,000 times without really seeing. "I didn't know. I bought this house at auction. All the portraits came with it." "My mother wasn't a decoration," Elias said, his voice tight. "She was a woman who gave up everything to marry my father." Ravenna's throat tightened. "There are more portraits, an entire gallery on the second floor. And there's a room, Jonathan Whitmore's study. I had it sealed when I bought the estate. I've never opened it." "Show me," Elias said. The study was behind a heavy oak door that Ravenna unlocked with trembling hands. Inside, time had stopped. Jonathan's desk sat exactly as he'd left it, papers scattered across its surface, and everywhere were photographs of Linda at every age, and a map covered with red pins marking locations across North Carolina. He was looking for her, Elias breathed. All these places, he was tracking her movements. Thomas Morrison, the lawyer, stepped forward studying investigator reports. "Mr. Chen, these documents show Jonathan spent hundreds of thousands trying to locate your mother in his final years. This report is dated 2 months before his death. He was close." "My mother died 5 years ago," Elias said quietly. If he'd found her just a few years earlier. Lily pointed to a locked drawer. "Daddy, what's this?" Ravenna tried several antique keys until one clicked. Inside was a leather journal and a sealed envelope marked, "To my grandson if he exists." Elias's hands trembled as he opened it. The letter explained Jonathan's desperate search, his regret over the estrangement, and contained a stunning instruction. "There's a safe behind the portrait of your grandmother. The combination is her birthday, 04-15-62. Inside, you'll find documents that reveal a truth involving another family whose paths crossed ours in tragedy." They found the safe and opened it. Inside were manila folders labeled Chen Li Investigation, Ashford Industries Connection, the 1989 incident, and most intriguingly, Ravenna, Truth for Future. Ravenna gasped. "That's impossible. Jonathan died before I even knew this estate existed." Morrison opened the folder with Ravenna's name. Inside was a photograph from a 2018 newspaper article showing young Ravenna accepting an award. Clipped to it was Jonathan's handwritten note. "If my grandson finds you, Ravenna Ashford, tell him this. I knew your grandmother, Margaret Ashford. I knew what really happened in 1989. The truth is, in the folder marked 1989 Incident." The folder revealed a devastating story. In 1989, Linda Whitmore had been driving home when her car was struck by another vehicle running a red light. The other driver was Richard Ashford, drunk, 19 years old, and he fled the scene. Richard Ashford was the son of Margaret Ashford. Margaret had used her money and connections to make the incident disappear. Richard was never charged. Linda's medical bills went unpaid, and when she sued, Ashford lawyers tied her up in court for years. "My father," Ravenna whispered, sinking into a chair. "Richard Ashford was my father. He died in a drunk driving accident when I was 6. No one ever told me he'd hurt someone before." "That your grandmother covered it up?" Elias finished, his voice hard. "That my mother spent years fighting legal battles your family could have ended with one phone call?" Morrison kept reading. The stress of the lawsuit contributed to Linda leaving Charlotte. She moved to Durham and lost contact with her father. Jonathan tried to help financially, but Linda refused, believing he'd chosen his pride over her dignity when she married Chen Wei. "They were both too proud," Elias said, "and the Ashford family's actions poisoned any chance at reconciliation." Ravenna felt the floor open beneath her. "My grandmother, my father, they destroyed your family twice. And you," Elias said quietly, "bought this estate at a fraction of its value and lived in luxury built on my family's suffering. Then you mocked us, called us pathetic, made Lily believe her dreams were worthless." "I didn't know," Ravenna said desperately. "My grandmother died when I was 5. My father was always drunk, always absent. I built my business from nothing because I was trying to escape the same poverty you lived in." "Aren't you repeating the same pattern?" Elias challenged. "You saw a janitor and decided you knew everything about his worth." Lily suddenly spoke up. "Daddy, you said we're supposed to be kind, even when other people aren't." The simple words cut through the tension. Elias looked at his daughter, then back at the documents. "Ravenna, I want this mansion back. It's Lily's inheritance, but I don't want to destroy you in the process. That's not who I want to be. What are you proposing? Truth. Full truth about 1989, about your grandmother's cover-up. In exchange, I'll give you time to transition without humiliation. I'll compensate you fairly for renovations, and I'll ask only one thing." "What?" "Help me understand why someone who came from struggle became cruel to others still struggling." "Because I don't believe you're naturally heartless." Ravenna felt something crack inside her armor. "I don't know if I can explain it, but I can try." Ravenna walked to the study windows. When she spoke, her voice was different, softer than Elias had heard before. "I was 7 when my father died in a drunk driving accident. Everyone said it was tragic, but I was relieved because when he was alive, he was terrifying. Drunk, violent, unpredictable." She turned back. "My mother worked 3 jobs. We lived in a trailer park. I wore second-hand clothes and qualified for free lunch. Other kids called me trailer trash. When I was 12, I swore I'd never be poor again. Never give anyone the power to make me feel small." "That doesn't excuse what you said to Lily," Elias said. "No, it doesn't, but it explains it. I got scholarships, worked night shifts, built my first dealership by 25. But somewhere in that climb, I stopped seeing people. Poor people reminded me too much of who I'd been, so I pushed them away. Like my daddy," Lily said quietly. Ravenna knelt to Lily's level. "Yes, sweetheart, like your daddy, and I was wrong." Morrison cleared his throat. "We still have legal matters to resolve. I want the truth made public," Elias said. "Not to destroy the Ashford name, but my mother deserved justice. Second, this mansion returns to my ownership. Third, you establish a fund in my mother's name, at least $5 million for children of single parents in service industries." Ravenna felt the number like a punch, but nodded. "Done. And you apologize to my daughter. Sincerely." Ravenna turned to Lily, kneeling again. "Lily, when you showed me your $17, I said terrible things. I made you feel worthless. But the truth is, you showed more grace than I've shown in my entire adult life." Tears streamed down Ravenna's face. "You're worth more than all my cars combined. Your daddy isn't pathetic, he's a hero." "I'm sorry, Lily, so sorry. And I promise I'm going to spend my life trying to deserve your forgiveness." Lily stepped forward and hugged Ravenna. "Mommy used to say everybody makes mistakes. She said the important thing is learning from them. Are you going to learn?" Ravenna held this child who had every reason to hate her. "Yes, I promise I will." They found another envelope on Jonathan's desk, a note that seemed addressed to both of them. "Your grandmother and I made choices that poisoned 2 families. You have the chance to choose differently. Don't waste it on pride or revenge." "He knew," Ravenna said. "Somehow he knew our paths would cross." Morrison was reading legal documents. Actually, Jonathan left specific instructions that if his heir was found, the probate court should inform the Ashford family. He wanted this confrontation. He wanted both families to face the truth together. As they worked out terms over the next hour, a strange peace settled over them. Ravenna would make her public statement within the week. The mansion would transfer within 6 months. The Linda Whitmore Memorial Scholarship would launch with $5 million. As they prepared to leave, Lily asked, "Miss Ravenna, when Daddy and I come to live here, will you teach me about the house?" Ravenna's throat tightened. "I'd love that, Lily. And maybe you can teach me something too," Lily added. "How to be kind even when it's hard." "That's easy," Lily smiled. "You just remember that everyone is somebody's favorite person." The wisdom hit Ravenna like a revelation. Later, as Elias tucked Lily into bed in their modest apartment, she asked, "Daddy, why was Miss Ravenna so sad even though she's so rich?" Elias thought carefully. "Because she spent so long climbing up that she forgot to bring anyone with her. When you reach the top alone, you realize the view doesn't mean much if you have no one to share it with." As Lily drifted off, Elias read more of Jonathan's journal and found words that felt like his grandfather speaking across death. "Break the cycle, grandson. Be the man your mother raised you to be. Show the world that inheriting money is easy, but inheriting wisdom is the real gift. If Ravenna Ashford is in your life, remember, she carries wounds too. Help her heal if you can." Across the city, Ravenna sat in the mansion library and cried. She cried for years, wasted building walls instead of bridges. And she cried with something like relief, because finally she had permission to be human again. Neither knew their story would become legend, inspiring others to look beyond surfaces and believe in second chances. 3 months later, moving day arrived. Elias and Lily stood in the Whitmore Estates foyer, now legally theirs. "It feels different now," Lily said, looking at her grandmother's portrait, "like it's really ours." Thomas Morrison entered carrying an old metal lockbox. The Historical Society found a sealed chamber in the basement. "This box has instructions that it should only be opened by Jonathan Whitmore's heir." The box was marked with the Whitmore crest and an envelope, "To my grandson, the truth that frees us all." "Should we call Ravenna?" Elias asked. "Already done. She's on her way." 20 minutes later, they gathered in the study. Ravenna had transformed over 3 months, working with Elias on the transition, getting to know Lily, launching the scholarship. "Whatever's in that box," she said, "I want you to know these have been the most meaningful months of my life." "You're not the villain," Lily said firmly. "Villains don't change. You changed." Elias opened the box. Inside were letters and photographs. The first was dated 1979, written in feminine handwriting. "My dearest Jonathan, I'm writing because I don't have the courage to tell you in person. The baby I'm carrying isn't yours. I've been having an affair with Richard Ashford. When I discovered I was pregnant, he abandoned me. His mother, Margaret, has made it clear that acknowledging this child would destroy their reputation. You're too good to trap in a marriage built on lies. I'm leaving." Elizabeth Elias looked up, confused. "Who's Elizabeth?" Morrison was already pale. "Jonathan's first wife. They divorced when she was pregnant with Linda." But the letter says Linda wasn't Jonathan's child," Ravenna said, shaking. "It says Linda's father was Richard Ashford." The implications crashed over them. Richard Ashford, Ravenna's father, had been Linda Whitmore's biological father. "Lily," Ravenna whispered, "we're family, real family. You're my half-niece." Morrison found another letter. Elizabeth, I don't care whose blood runs through Linda's veins. I raised her from birth. I loved her as my daughter. The biological father who abandoned you has no claim. Linda is my daughter in every way that matters. He never told her, Elias said. My mother never knew Jonathan wasn't her biological father. Ravenna read another document. Margaret Ashford knew. She paid Elizabeth $50,000 in 1979 to keep the secret. She couldn't stand the scandal of her son having an illegitimate child. That's why she covered up the 1989 accident, Morrison said. If there'd been a trial, the truth about Linda's parentage might have come out. So our families weren't just connected by tragedy, Elias said. We were literally family, and everyone conspired to hide it. Ravenna found Jonathan's final unsent letter to Linda, explaining everything and begging forgiveness for his pride. He never sent it, Elias said, voice breaking. My mother died without knowing. Lily spoke up. Great-grandpa loved Grandma Linda, even though she wasn't his real daughter. That means real family isn't about blood. It's about choosing to love people. Lily's right, Ravenna said. Jonathan chose Linda. You chose to forgive me. That's what family means. Morrison found one more document. Jonathan updated his will with a codicil about Ravenna. If Ravenna Ashford is still living, I ask that my heir extend to her an invitation to be part of the Whitmore legacy. She is not responsible for her grandmother's sins. Give her the chance to choose differently. Ravenna wept, understanding that Jonathan had chosen forgiveness. We honor his wishes, Elias said. We tell the truth, all of it, and we expand the scholarship, not just the Linda Whitmore Fund, but the Jonathan Whitmore Legacy Fund for children dealing with complicated family histories. I'll match whatever you put in, Elias added. This fortune is more than enough for us. The rest should break the cycles that trapped our families. They made plans for a foundation dedicated to family reconciliation and supporting children from broken homes. As they prepared to leave the study, Lily asked, Miss Ravenna, do you still have that car dealership? I do, sweetheart. Why? Because Daddy promised we'd buy a Mercedes from you. Can we do that now? Ravenna and Elias looked at each other, recognizing how far they'd both come. Actually, Ravenna said, kneeling, I have a better idea. Come to my dealership, pick your favorite car, and I'll give it to you as a gift, because families give gifts, and you're family now. Really? Really? And I'll have them put a special plaque on it that says, the Lily Chen Mercedes, reminding us that dreams are worth keeping. 2 weeks later, Ravenna gathered her sales staff at the dealership and invited media. 3 months ago, I committed an act of terrible cruelty. I mocked a hard-working father and his daughter because they didn't look like they belonged. I judged them by their clothes, and I was wrong. She gestured to Elias and Lily. What I didn't know was that Elias is heir to a $40 million fortune, but that's not why I'm apologizing. I'm apologizing because even if he'd been exactly what I assumed, he still deserved respect. His daughter still deserved kindness. The media coverage was extensive. More impactful were the people who reached out afterward, people who'd been dismissed based on appearance, who found hope in this story. 6 months later, the Whitmore estate hosted its first annual gala for the Jonathan Whitmore Legacy Foundation. Hundreds attended, including scholarship recipients and families who'd benefited. Elias watched Lily dance and felt his mother's presence. She'd raised him with the values Jonathan had tried to teach: kindness, resilience, and the belief that circumstances don't define worth. Ravenna approached. Thank you for giving me the chance to be part of something meaningful, for showing me that wealth without compassion is just expensive loneliness. Thank you for learning, Elias replied, for choosing to be the great aunt Lily deserves. They watched the celebration together. Do you ever think about that day? Ravenna asked. Every day, but not with anger. I think about it as the day that set everything in motion. If you hadn't been cruel, I might never have discovered my inheritance. And if we hadn't collided, we might never have discovered we were family. Across the ballroom, Lily was showing another little girl her framed $17. This is my good luck money. The lady said it wasn't enough to buy a Mercedes, but Daddy said it was enough to buy dignity. Elias thought about his grandfather's words. Break the cycle, grandson. They'd done it. The cycle of judgment and secrets had been broken, replaced by transparency, kindness, and chosen family. The janitor had become a millionaire, but more importantly, he'd taught his daughter that wealth was measured in character, not bank accounts. The CEO had lost her mansion, but gained her humanity, and the family she'd never known she needed. And Lily Chen, with her $17 and a dream, had taught them all the most important lesson. Everyone deserves dignity. Everyone is somebody's favorite person. The story became legend, but for those who lived it, the truth was simpler. Two families torn by secrets found healing in honesty. Two people trapped by their worst instincts found freedom in forgiveness. And one little girl changed everything by believing dreams were worth keeping. They all lived not in perfection, but in the complicated, beautiful reality of chosen family and second chances.